Okay. Well, sorry we're getting started a bit late. Unfortunately, our keynote speaker could not make it in time. He got caught up in another engagement, but we'll see if he is able to join the panel later. In the meantime, I'm Maxine Jaslow. I'm a climate reporter for the Washington Post, and I'm going to have each of my esteemed panelists introduce themselves and talk for a few minutes about what they would like to see in the ocean and climate space. Starting on my right, Sebastian, if you would like to start.
Wonderful, and thank you so much. I'm Sebastian Osborne with Mercy for Animals. We're an international NGO, and my work at UNFCCC focuses on supporting the better integration of food systems and more sustainable food consumption into the negotiated outcomes as well as into national plans. I'm very excited to be on this panel today, as our food system is a critical topic for enhancing ocean resilience and marine conservation, and enhancing ocean resilience and marine conservation is a critical topic for our food system. So what I'd like to talk about are the links between these, as well as some specific and cross-cutting issues for progress. So as we know, marine ecosystems are under huge pressure from climate change impacts, such as marine heat waves and ocean acidification, as well as from direct unsustainable uses of the marine environment. When it comes to food systems, these issues interact. On the one hand, damaged and depleted ecosystems are increasingly struggling to support food security for many vulnerable populations who have traditionally relied on marine foods. On the other hand, overfishing and ecologically harmful fishing, which are the primary drivers of marine biodiversity loss, reduce the adaptive capacity of ecosystems to function under climate change, as well as impacting humans and marine life. To address these, we need more sustainable and equitable production, consumption, and an enabling environment that recognizes the importance of robust marine ecosystems within the broader climate system. Looking at sustainable production first, there are some critical opportunities for improvement. First, we can address high-impact fishing practices. Some forms of fishing gear, such as bottom trawls or drift nets, are highly unselective and can catch more untargeted species, resulting in discards than they actually result in landings. Many countries have made progress here that others can follow. For example, the United States has adopted policies to phase out large mesh drift nets, an effort which Mercy for Animals, my organization, was able to contribute to. Measures to mark and track gear can also reduce the prevalence of ghost nets that can decimate from marine life for many years after being lost. Another opportunity is reducing the use of carnivorous aquaculture systems, which can put tremendous pressure on wild fish that are caught for feed. This pressure affects the well-being of these animals, their populations, as well as artisanal and subsistence fishing communities in many parts of the world. While reducing harms, we also need to upscale beneficial production. Seaweed mariculture, for example, not only provides important contributions to nutrition, but can also be carbon negative and supportive of good ecosystems if implemented correctly. However, with more than 90% of fish stocks being fully exploited or overfished, we need to change consumption as well. Seafood consumption is rising globally, but differs vastly between countries. While aquatic foods are integral to food security in many developing countries, many high-consuming countries significantly overconsume seafood. For example, per capita consumption in the EU is about double the target levels identified by the Eat Lancet Commission. Wealthy countries need to take the lead on reducing these pressures on ecosystems and on food insecure countries. They can do this through policies that shift consumption to lower trophic species and to reduce retail and consumer waste. Critically, also, they can promote plant-based alternatives, as Mercy for Animals is currently advocating for countries to do where possible in the upcoming round of NDCs. Finally, I want to touch on how better valuing the role of marine ecosystems can support these and other conservation measures. In recent years, the scientific evidence on the importance of marine environments to climate mitigation has developed rapidly. For example, research in the last several years indicates the contribution that marine sediments make to carbon storage and sequestration. By some estimates, the emissions from the disruption of these by bottom trawling exceeds those annually of the aviation sector. Likewise, the scientific evidence on the role that marine fauna play in marine carbon cycles has developed, indicating the potential for restored populations to provide potentially gigatons of sequestration. If the role of marine ecosystems is better understood by countries and accounted for under the UNFCCC as well as nationally, this could better align mitigation and conservation priorities and open new climate finance opportunities, supporting not only more sustainable production and consumption, but also other policies such as increasing marine protected areas. There's some great opportunities for solutions, and we're excited to see progress in upcoming NDCs, NAPs, as well as other policy processes to support the well being of people, animals, ecosystems, and our climate. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sebastian. That was a really surprising statistic you just cited on the emissions impact of bottom trawling by some estimates exceeding that of the entire aviation sector. I feel like I'm learning something new every day at COP, and that's just one example. Next, we'll turn to Kenrick for an introduction and your opening remarks.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, thank you so much and good afternoon. Um, so I work with the Ministry of Sustainable Development and Climate Change of Belize. I'm the Vice Minister the last 4 years, or Chief Executive Officer. And so we've been involved on the operational side, right? And it's trying to get to some of these things that my colleague indicate. Belize is a small country in the Caribbean, for those who may not know, um, with one of the largest barrier reef system in the Western Hemisphere, the second largest in the world. So we like to call ourselves one of these big oceans countries, right? And so what we do, I mean, have global impact, right? In terms of fisheries resource, in terms of our conservation objectives. Our approach to conservation has largely been a devolved approach to marine conservation, i.e., it's largely stakeholder driven, community driven, with less government oversight. It's largely been a co-managed approach to marine protected areas. And over the years, we've been seeing how best to support those guided by the science, right? Guided by the fish catch, guided by you know um, the various approaches in terms of quotas and total allowable catches and stuff like that. To be able to do that and to get to where we need to go, there's several inputs into this thing. Our communities traditionally are fishers, right? And so to move away from certain traditional systems, there needs to be alternative. And I'm not talking about the tokenism, alternative livelihoods that we normally do, but how do these people actively define and are part of the process of that transition? So to get to what you indicate in terms of seaweed mariculture as an alternative, for example, it has to be the women in the community, it has to be the fishers in the community to say this is a viable alternative for us, you know, because the seaweed catch is catching money. I mean, we are getting the demand on our resources. And so to meet then the sustainable approach to fisheries management and say, we're going to meet these two things halfway practically, then we need to build capacity of local communities, of women, of young people, to be able to do the work and then support that traditional approach. That's, as I said, really from the bottom up approach. Of course, from a regulatory perspective, the government has been involved in then setting the institutional mechanism, building out a forest fisheries department, sorry, that's then able to support the communities, that is able to mobilize the resource, that is able to do the planning in terms of NDCs and the integration into the NDCs, meeting the UNFCCC commitments and that type of thing. So Belize has largely been pioneering a series of, and as I said to my colleagues, sort of this multi-level approach to fisheries management and ocean management and large ocean resilience. Because it's not going to be done by just the government. It cannot be done just by the community. It's how you get the private sector involved, how you get government set the enabling environment and regulatory framework, and how do you continue to make the people, the communities drive the ocean resilience and adaptation that you want. And then, of course, that has to be done in sort of the long game, the long term sustainable approach to doing this thing. So most of the things that you talked about, we've banned bottom trawling. We've phased out certain gears, and again, some of it successful. Some of it certainly you have to rethink. Again, approach is important, ensuring that the people understand the reason for that transition. They're part of the process. They're part of the decision making. So again, how do governments strengthen the various community associations like the Fishers corporations, the federation, and how are they involved in the process? Again, at all levels. I was sharing earlier again that we have a very coordinated civil society. We have, for example, an NGO senator who, again, is part of the regulatory and decision making process at the highest level, and then provides, from a parliamentary perspective, the balance that is needed in some of these decision making. So that's sort of the high level view of sort of what's going on in Belize in terms of the broader ocean resilience. And we continue to try to be trailblazing in some of these approaches. We try to be innovative in some of the financing mechanism that we need. We launched one of the largest blue loans about um, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, um, reducing our debt by 12%. We shaved off, I think. We raised about $180 million for marine conservation over 20 years. As part of that, we've committed to expanding our ocean conservation space to 30% by 2030. We're already at 26%, and we expect to get to the end of that by to that 30% by 2026, and expanding beyond that. And that represents high biodiversity protection zone, medium sustainable use zones, all of these key things. So I'll pause for now, and yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Kenrick. And we were talking earlier amongst ourselves before this panel got started, and I was saying how struck I was by the fact that Belize has a civil society representative in your Senate, and I think that would be an interesting exercise in the United States. Perhaps our policies would look a bit different, perhaps not. I'm just going to give a few remarks about this panel broadly and then dive into some questions for our two panelists. But the panel today is really focused on ocean policy. You may not have heard it quite as much about that at COP. There's obviously a lot of issues here to be discussed, from climate finance to adaptation to mitigation. But this panel really aims to shine a light on oceans and the crucial role that they play in regulating the climate and providing essential ecosystem services. At the same time, they're facing unprecedented threats right now from human activities and from climate change, including pollution, overfishing, and ocean acidification. Protecting and restoring marine ecosystems is essential for building climate resilience and ensuring a sustainable future. Recent reports from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, highlight the urgent need for ocean conservation and climate action. And by protecting marine ecosystems, we can mitigate climate change, adapt to its impacts, and secure a sustainable future for generations to come. So, at a high level, we all understand the importance of ocean resilience, but to get into the details, I'd love to ask our two panelists, whoever wants to take this one first, what strategies are essential for enhancing the resilience of ocean ecosystems? And in particular, how can marine protected areas be effectively managed to protect biodiversity and ecosystem services?
Okay, maybe I could take a first step. So it's really understanding the importance of these marine protected areas. Um, it's in understanding those who use and benefit from these resources, It's understanding that marine protected areas do not operate in isolation, and so you have to look uh, in terms of a system approach, and having your management systems then function from what we refer to as, the ridge to reef system. So what you do in your mountains and your rivers will affect your ocean space. What communities do upstream will affect your ocean space. And as I said in my earlier intervention, this cannot be done without your communities, your private sector, your civil society, and then understanding the feedback, right? These linked social ecological systems. I think once you understand the premise of those things, I think it improves the way that you manage. And our data shows that over time, where we apply this co-management, this collaborative management approach, management effectiveness of these protected areas have been significantly better than those fully managed by just public sector, just by the fisheries department or the forest department or any other agencies, because you have collaborative approaches, because you have adaptable approaches where communities are involved, where the fisher folks are involved, where civil society organizations are involved. So from that premise, then marine protected areas really allows for the the tool through which you manage those resources, sustainable use those resources, protect those resources, ensure its viability. So again, all of the things that my colleague indicated earlier, it is through that process you ensure the sustainability of your fishery population. It's true that you ensure that nursery habitats are protected. You ensure that the critical ecosystems, your mangrove ecosystems, they are protected. Our analysis show that when we did a biodiversity assessment, that um, land use change is protected, and is abated because of the existence of these marine and terrestrial protected areas, right? So where you have a protected areas, of course, then you have less land use change, meaning you have less cutting down of your mangroves for development purposes. It does happen, right? um, but both on your coast and within your terrestrial protected area system, you cannot beat that with those protected areas. You cannot beat overfishing. You cannot beat the impacts of pollution. You cannot beat the typology of development. So yes, we can allow some approaches to development, but establishing marine protected areas can assist. Now you have, of course, your traditional marine protected areas, full-fledged defined areas with various use zones, protection zones, etc. But then there are those others, like your spawning irrigation sites, right, which is just congregating sites um, for your fisheries resource, or just nursing sites, or breeding grounds, etc. And those are also important to be protected. And then, of course, your use zones, your tourism zones, your eco development zones, and some of those areas. So marine protected areas have largely been effective in ensuring sort of the long-term sustainability of your resources. But again, that has to be done in a systemic way, understanding the inputs, understanding the players, understanding the importance of the enabling environment, understanding the importance of finance, to be able to support the work that you do, because conservation is quite expensive, and for small states like Belize, raising the finance is very, very critical. And so the bond that I referred to earlier has really helped us to secure sort of targeted resources to support the protection of these core areas. We have, like I said, more than 250 miles of coastline, and so to protect that. Belize is a small country bordered by Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, countries with a lot of resource, and so to protect that and to say, this area we want to ensure it's viable, that it's protected, that we don't have encroachment of external fishers who don't care about our policies, who don't care about our protection um, plans, and can easily overwhelm our little resource to all that we've done over years to protect it, because of course the resources is being stressed in other areas, right? So those are some of the things that we also uh, some of the challenges we also try to address and manage with, at the local level.
Thank you, Kenrick. And 250 miles of coastline is a lot of coastline. Um, Sebastian, anything you want to add, or?
Thank you. And I think these are such critical points, and it's so good to hear the extent to which countries are recognizing the importance of a systems approach and have integrated that into their policy working, as well as focusing on not only the right policies, but making policies happen in the right way, consulting affected communities, and inclusive process. Um, so I wholeheartedly agree on those. I think one thing I'd maybe um, extend on thinking of the COP process, but as well as others, is the importance of multilateral systems to support these things. So, for example, in ensuring that countries are cooperating in to support each other's objectives in marine conservation and ocean resilience. Taking forward, we've seen important work done recently at the WTO on fisheries subsidies um, to phase out subsidies for illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing, for example, making sure that gets implemented, as well as additional work to align the way we have subsidies happening multilaterally with the conservation and resilience objectives that we need to pursue. And I think if we can get those synergies and alignment at the multilateral level, that will enable countries to better pursue the good policy making they're doing at the national and local levels also.
Thanks, Sebastian. And I think that's actually a good segue into my next question. You were just talking about the importance of multilateralism and the multilateral negotiations, and what bigger forum for that on climate than COP29. So far, ocean ecosystems and ocean resilience have not featured quite as prominently at COP, but how do you both think we can integrate conversations about ocean resilience into broader discussions about climate action, and how have you both sought to do that in your own work?
Happy to kick off with a few thoughts on that. So I think under UNFCCC, for example, we have some existing processes that can help with this. So, for example, we have the annual Ocean and Climate Dialogue, but there are ways that we can improve on making use of that space and taking messages from that through to the meetings of the governing bodies, for example, also. Um, I think we also have an opportunity when we're having these global negotiations to make sure that these issues are being elevated and considered. So we had references to multiple references to the marine environment, for example, in the global stocktake from last year. But we can make sure that we're following up on those in other decisions, follow-up processes as well, and making sure that these issues are kept central to the global conversations. I think ensuring that systemic approaches are part of the way we look at issues in the climate space is also really important. I think there are issues to consider with marine systems and some of the interactions, but other systems as well that interact with these or are part of these. So, for example, the food system as well. And to mention the global stocktake again, last year we saw the first reference to resilient food systems in a decision under the Paris Agreement, and we saw the COP28 UAE Declaration on Food and Agriculture, for example. So I think these types of things that deal with sectors that deeply affect the quality of ocean resilience and marine conservation are it's important that we're addressing these and considering them in these processes too.
Yeah, thank you for that. From a government perspective, there are some spaces in which we engage in the multilateral process. You've got, of course, you have the Oceans Conference, you have the marine pollution, you have the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. So there's some of these processes in which we engage and ensure that ocean resilience is championed, and some of the similar challenges that we try to champion at COP. The problem is that it is segmented, and that may be by design. Um, and by purpose, but that is a problem because you have discussion here on the UNCLOS, the UNOC, separately the UNFCCC process, and there's very little integration or very little opportunity to integrate, and that is one of the issues that we face. Um, just to engage in that process is difficult. A small country with limited resources to effectively be part of even this COP process is difficult. The costs, the time, the resources, the limited human resources that we have. And then in 2 weeks, we just came from Cali, Colombia for the CBD COP, and then this one, and then the certification COP right after this, and the Oceans COP was in the summer. I mean, again, how effectively can we participate in those multilateral processes when by design they're meant to, to be fragmented? So that is one of the fundamental challenges of this process. And again, when certain stakeholders come to these sessions, I mean, they bring an extensive delegation with lawyers and all of these, and so they can play the long game, which we can't, you know. So again, just some challenges in the process. The process do exist. The process needs to be integrated and improved for effective participation. I mean, sometimes I think we forget why we do these things, right? I forget why we decided so many years ago that there should be a convention. I think we forgot it's about climate change, and we forgot about all of the fundamental issues why we came together and say we need to have some agreement on how we address this issue of climate change because lives, people, livelihoods are being impacted because ecosystems are being impacted, right? When you sit in a negotiating room, you wonder if the people who are fighting against it really remember why we started this process so many years ago, or even in the other spaces, right? How did a convention on biodiversity become a convention, an economic and a legal affair? So those are really some of the fundamental challenges, and I think that um, we have to, as small states, have to continuously be present as best as possible and champion the fundamental reasons because we deal with the challenges, yet um, we continue to increase ambition. I just said that we are looking at expanding our ocean conservation space. We could have said, you know what, there's oil potential in my ocean. Let's explore for the oil. I could say, there's a significant demand on fisheries resource. And let's get rich from that. But no, instead we said, no, we want to increase ambition. We want to increase the size of our ocean conservation space. We put a moratorium on any exploration of oil. We didn't want anybody to even consider that this would be an option. But that's a trade-off for us, right? And so again, those are some of the challenges in this multilateral process.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for that. I'm going to just ask one final question. You can both give some closing remarks and answers, and then I'll actually open it up to the audience for any questions you all may have. Um, final question for you both is just how can marine conservation be integrated into both national and international climate policies? Kenrick, if you want to maybe take a stab at how Belize has attempted to integrate that.
Yeah, there, like many other things, there has to be key champions, and so we see now the building up of national capacities to be integrated into overall national planning is important. We have established, for example, a national climate change framework, a national protected area systems framework through which civil society, private sector, and government should have come together to strategically address, um, in line with the development objectives, address ocean conservation, marine conservation, and larger protected areas conservation, so that again, there's not just marine conservation in one silo and terrestrial conservation in the other. but a more comprehensive national approach to protected areas management. With that, then you're able to define your priorities. You're able to look at your finance needs, for example, and say, to meet my marine conservation goals, to meet my national protected areas conservation goals, to meet my development goals, this is a cost. These are the support that I need. And then you're able to then scale that up into these multilateral process. Um, and then in these multilateral process, you're going to, as we do as blocks, as the Alliance of Small Island Developing States, for example, AOSIS, as a group, then we can continue to champion the importance of oceans, and that's why we're moving away from this idea of small island developing states to being big ocean countries because I mean that's the value we bring to the table. All the efforts we've done in terms of marine conservation. So again, just reframing how maybe somebody had framed it for us and said, "Oh, you're just small islands, right?" But no, we're a big ocean, so we require more seats at the table. We require consistently to be at the table. We require consistently to be engaged. So I think those are some of the things that we continue to do to ensure we continue to champion the importance of the ocean space. And again, fundamentally, the reason why we do it. The When you look at the sequestration potential for mangroves, seagrass, right, is significantly greater than any technology you are going to implement in the next 20 years, right? And so when you look at the importance of forests, and again, the role that they play in the balance of this climate system, it's important that we continue to champion that. We cannot be diverted away from the bottom line, right? Of why we do what we do, and what our countries bring to the table in terms of the overall climate system.
Absolutely, and I think to support one thing that can really help in supporting some of the things. I mean, we have policy pathways that where we can bring marine conservation into the conversation more, but we need to better elevate the issues and the understanding of the importance of this as well. So I think we've got a lot of opportunities where this can happen. I think the IPCC's seventh assessment cycle coming up, I hope we'll see a strong focus on marine conservation and that, so that we can start really as fully as possible understanding and where possible being able to quantify the benefits of some of these things and some of the things, for example, high seas sequestration, the role of fauna in that, it will be incredibly helpful at having the best available science within this process reflect those things for integrating it into policy making later as well. And I think along with that, we also need to be um, ensuring that we have processes that can recognize when countries are taking leadership in these areas, and the sacrifice that they've made in some areas and the way that supports other benefits, but also the common good of our work towards marine conservation and ocean resilience as well. So I think being able to have spaces where those are recognized, where, for example, international climate finance is able to support those activities as well, are those are really important things for ensuring that countries are seeing the global interest as align as well as possible with all the different national interests that are at play.
Thank you both. I am done with my questions. I'm now going to open it up to the audience. If anyone has any questions, and I'm just going to put my headset on. I think I see a question in the back.
Hi, I have a question to Dr. Kenrick. I want to go back to your point about fragmentation. Um, I just wonder if you have thoughts or have come across any example or model where this fragmentation became more of a nexus or convergence approach, and not only like thinking about the international arena as you mentioned. We discussed biodiversity in Cali, and then discuss climate here, and then discuss something else whereas the problem solution exists in the nexus of all of these discussions, but at the national level as well. I'm from Brazil, and you have ministries not even understanding what's going on in these different spaces, and then you have messages that are conflict with each other because, I mean, in the scope of Brazil, you see that reality there. But I just wonder if you have come across a model or a system or a space where there is this convergence, and if you have not come across, what are your thoughts on how that could work?
Yeah, that's a good question, and a real practical one. Um, for us, it's very similar in Belize, and it's an evolving process, right? Um, in line with all of the international process that is ongoing. What I mean by that, consider this UNFCCC process. We had first NDCs, and then that was updated, and now we're NDC 3.0. And with that, there's the development of this finance mechanism, GCF and adaptation fund, and the JEF, and all of these things in line with that. And then you would appreciate that some years ago, climate finance was non-existent, right? And so it was something to be considered by the Ministry of Climate Change or the Department of Climate Change, not by the Ministry of Finance, not by the Ministry of Economic Development or Planning or any other ministry. Today, it almost seems like a pot that everybody is trying to get their hands on, right? And so now it's not just a climate change. You climate change people, you deal with the science. Ministry of Finance, we're going to deal with the money and that. So yeah, as that process evolves, then evolve you're going to need to develop systems. So we had to, over time, develop sort of as best as possible the institutional mechanism through which these various ministries can work together and said this is a national priority. That's I would lie if I say we've figured it out, but it's an evolving process. So for instance, we within the Ministry of Climate Change had a climate finance unit, and we've been accredited to the GCF since about 5 years or so, and the adaptation fund, and we've been mobilizing. 4 years ago or 3 years ago, the Ministry of Finance says, well, yeah, like I said, I need to get my hands on some of those money. That's good money. That's big money. And we could augment the coffers with that, um, and so also develop a climate finance unit. And we were fighting, right? Says this, hey, this is our territory. Step back. Um, but as that process evolved, we started to define then how we best look at what are the national priorities for climate change. But to do that, we need to understand the NDCs. And so that's why I keep saying in these forums, the NDCs have to be a nationally driven process. It can't be external consultants who come and supposedly help you to develop an NDC. No. So our first NDC, I mean, very few people understood what that was. The second one, we were better. The third one, we're doing it fully in house because we want national ownership and national capacity to build to define these things within our NDC. They are achievable. These things within our NDC are part of our development priorities. So now we have the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Economic Development, the Ministry of Sustainable Development, the Ministry of Blue Economy, the 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 private sector associations, the universities, part of the development process so that it is a national process. And then with that national priority, with those national, that national document, we outline the national priorities and then we seek financing to support those national priorities. So we know where the Ministry of Sustainable Development comes in. We know where the Ministry of Finance comes in because we do need some of the national resource. We've decided, for instance, when we're going to go for adaptation fund for GCF finance, we're not going to develop a PPF and spend 5 years to get that and then develop the full prop. No, we're going to use our money to do the feasibility study and the assessments so that we can fast track that process if we're going to get any real financing from GCF. So some of those things have worked, and again, that's evolved and developed as time goes by. No? Yeah.
Thank you, and that was a great question. Do we have any more questions in the audience? I'm not seeing any hands. Shy audience today. Well, thank you all so much. Please join me in thanking both of our panelists, and thank you all for taking the time out of a busy COP to come and attend this panel and hear about marine conservation. So thanks so much.
Thank you.